Hey everybody, my name is Amanda, and today I'm going to be talking about um, climate change, and the subtopic is going to be coral bleaching. Um, Coral bleaching is something that occurs due to stress in a coral's environment, often a heating of the water. Um, You can see in this first picture here, the tips of the coral is starting to turn white as opposed to the reddish color that you typically see in that coral. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, what it is, why it occurs, and what we can do about it. So why does coral bleaching occur? So coral is actually a living animal. Um, it has the polyp um, that is alive, and then it's got its hard skeletal structure. There's a symbiotic relationship between that polyp and algae in the water. The algae is what gives the coral its color. It also photosynthesizes, which gives the polyp some more energy. They can get nutrients and energy from things floating through the water by them, but they typically need that symbiotic relationship with the algae and that photosynthetic energy in order to survive. So when a coral becomes stressed, either by uh, a change in the water temperature is the most typical reason it occurs, or changes in different aspects of the water, pH, things like that, the coral will become stressed. It'll go into a survival mode where it tries to exert as little energy as possible, just to keep itself alive. So to do that, it can no longer have that relationship with the algae. So it will go ahead and expel that algae out of the polyp. Since the algae is what gives it color, it'll lose that color and become white. So when a coral is beginning to bleach and turns white, it might not necessarily be dead just yet. Um, that polyp can still be alive and still be producing energy. If the water temperature recovers, and the coral is able to um, kind of recover from the bleaching event, it will actually absorb a new algae, its color will return, and the coral will be able to recover. This does not happen all too often. Most of the time, if a coral gets to the point of bleaching and becoming white, it will die. So, a lot of you may have heard about the mass bleaching event. It did make quite a lot of headlines back in 2016. This happened on a good portion of the Great Barrier Reef. With this, there was a lot of research done into the before and after. How did this affect the overall vitality of the reef, the species living on the reef, and so on? So I'm going to take a look at this first study that used data from both before the 2016 bleaching event and after. Um, it looked at 186 sites along the Great Barrier Reef and the Western Coral Sea. A year after the bleaching event, reductions in live coral of up to 51% were observed on the surveyed reefs, and they experienced extreme temperatures. However, regional patterns of coral mortality were patchy. So over 51% of the corals did experience bleaching, but then there were patchiness on which corals were able to survive and recover from that extreme temperature. There was consistent decline in coral reef feeding fishes, um, that were in the areas that were affected. Um, Other short-term responses of reef fishes and invertebrates could be attributed directly to changes in coral cover. The fish need the coral to survive. If the coral's not there anymore, they're obviously going to have to move on. The full impact of the 2016 bleaching event may not be realized until the dead corals erode over the next decades. It was also noted that short-term observations suggest that the recovery process and the ultimate scale of impact are affected by functional changes in communities, and this is dependent on the coral's thermal affinities or the local reef-associated fauna. So different corals are going to react differently to the temperature changes. Some are more sturdy when it comes to temperature changes. There's also other local fauna that can be impacted by the climate change. So it's going to be kind of regional on which communities are affected and how severely they are affected. Over on the right, you can see a picture of a before and after with some coral bleaching on some, I believe it's staghorn coral. You can see it's normally a purpley color in the first picture, and then afterwards it's that completely white color. Um, there have been some studies done on the fish communities and other species that live around corals during bleaching events. One of the studies has noted that when a bleaching event occurs, the fish tend to become more homogeneous in the area. There's a subtle shift, but it is significant towards those of small bodies, algal farming, habitat generalists. These fish tend to survive these bleaching events better. Um, it was also noted that pre-bleaching coral composition better predicted changes in fish assemblage other than the magnitude of coral loss. So more about the types of coral that are lost rather than the amount of coral lost. Um, Here are a couple papers that I was referencing in today's presentation if you want to go ahead and read up on it. This is a really interesting topic to me, at least, and it is very prevalent with the ongoing climate and especially ocean temperature changes, since these corals are so sensitive to even slight changes, how the slight change in water temperature can affect these entire giant communities of species and fish, especially when you're dealing with ecosystems as big as the Great Barrier Reef. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation and feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Thank you very much.